Welcome in to episode 27 of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we've got some things to discuss. Namely, Alabama's blowout of South Florida. And if you watch the game and disagree with me, then you're wrong. But seriously, so we're going to talk about the South Florida game. If you missed the episode last time, we obviously broke down the South Florida game. But if you are not subscribed to the YouTube channel, I really recommend it, because over on the YouTube channel, I actually dropped a video that I did not put out on the podcast platforms, and it was talking about all things basketball. There were quite a few things that happened in basketball, whether it be recruiting, actually an exhibition game, as well as talking about one of our players, Chris Youngblood, that's coming in this season. So if you are interested in basketball, definitely check out the YouTube channel. Consider subscribing over there. Like I said, there's a lot of content. In general, I do put out most of it on podcast platform as well, but there's some things that don't warrant a full episode, but I do still want to put out the content. So if you are interested, please consider subscribing there, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. So let's get right into the South Florida recap. So as I mentioned, we're going to be recapping South Florida in this episode, and if you're not subscribed to the channel here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, I really recommend it. My name's Owen Barnes. I graduated from Alabama in 2019 in sports marketing and PR. Been a lifelong Bama fan from this area my whole life, and I mean, that's who I am. So this game, I want to start with going through the game, and then we'll actually talk about all the Saban ceremonies after the game. So as normal, I was at this game, and I'm going to call it a blowout. And the only reason I feel comfortable in calling it a blowout is I think that the only reason this game was close was Alabama shot themselves in the foot. Now, did the shooting themselves in the foot still happen? Absolutely. It 100% happened. If you watch this game, you know that Alabama did it, right? There were 9 penalties called on the offensive line, including 2 that brought back touchdowns. Alabama had 3 fumbles, including 1 on the 2-yard line. So this game was 14-13 in the fourth quarter. So from the outside looking in, if you did not watch this game, it really felt like Alabama could not do anything. And it was kind of true. However, for those of you that aren't super analytics people, Bill Connolly with ESPN, formerly SB Nation, puts out a post-game win expectancy where he has a formula where he puts in all the stats, without the score, of course, into a computer and says, with these stats, what's the expected win expectancy of the team, right? So 100% means 100% of the time the team that won should have won. 0% is not going to happen because that's like that team won, right? So it has to be something. For example, the Oklahoma State-Arkansas game, Oklahoma State only had about an 18% post-game win expectancy. So in theory, Arkansas wins that game about 82% of the time, even though Oklahoma State obviously did end up winning the game, right? His formula spit out that Alabama had a 100% post-game win expectancy, right? So the stats and everything that took place in the game thinks it's a blowout. Obviously, if you're an Alabama fan or if you were there in person, if you watched on TV and saw all the disappointed looks on people's faces, it did not feel that way. Obviously, the score ended up being that way, but if you did not watch this game, you're very confused what I'm even talking about. So let me go through the game. I'm going to do this breakdown a little differently than I did last week because I don't want to do good, bad, and what I'm still looking into. I just wanted to kind of take it position group by position group and say, this is what I really liked about it, and this is what I think needs to change. And it has to start with the offensive line. That has to be the first thing we talk about, because when you look at this game and you look at what went wrong and then actually what ended up going right at the end of the game, it starts and ends with the offensive line, especially on the offense. So Caden Proctor, who was injured prior to last game, during last game, or I guess in pregame warmups before the last game, did not play in this game. And DeBoer mentioned that he was very close, but they decided to keep him out. And so he was in sweatpants on the sideline and did not play at all this game. So because of this, Tyler Booker, our starting left guard, moved to left tackle. Gino Vandemark is the backup left guard, so he started. And then Wilcom Formby was on the right tackle. prior, we talked about last game that Wilkin Formby had won the battle against Elijah Pritchett, and that Formby was the starter last game, so that continued. So the right side of the line was unchanged. The left side of the line had Booker move to tackle, and then Vandemark go to guard. And this caused a lot of problems. There were holding calls, 2 of them against Vandemark, the backup left guard that was starting. There ended up being 4 holding calls on Wilkin Formby, our right tackle, who ended up getting pulled for Elijah Pritchett toward the end of the game, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. As well as there were 2 false starts and a block in the back. There were 9 penalties on this offensive line, and it was very clear that these guys were not comfortable in the positions they were in and playing next to and with the guys they were playing with and next to, right? It was very clear to me that Booker and Vandemark were not comfortable playing with each other side by side, because that's just not obviously Booker's natural position. And it just did not feel to me like this offensive line was comfortable at all. And South Florida could see it and was taking advantage of it at every turn, right? The times that Alabama did score, they thankfully didn't get them called back for penalties. But there were 2 other occasions that I mentioned where those got called back on holding calls. I believe 1 on Vandemark and 1 on Formby got called back for touchdowns. And then, or maybe actually 2 of Formby's called back touchdowns. There may have ended up being 3 by the end of the game. But they called back touchdowns, and then that gets you behind the sticks. And if you don't get back ahead of possession, what happens is when you get into that passing down on 2nd and 3rd down, South Florida was doing a cover 0, send everybody. They were overwhelming Alabama's offensive line. Alabama didn't have the quick slants or the quick passing play to be able to get it out of Milroe's hands, and he was running for his life. Anyone that looks at this game and thinks Milroe was the issue in the game did not watch the game. I'm not saying Milroe played a perfect game. That's not at all what I'm saying. But Milroe was not the issue with what the passing problems in today's game were, or yesterday's game were. The issues started at the offensive line, and that was the biggest problem. Right? This game was called fairly tight. There were over 11 penalties by both teams. So, I mean, this was a fairly tightly called game. There were a lot of penalties being thrown, offensive holding, defensive holding, false start. Just everything was being called very, very tightly, which happens sometimes, right? But no matter the case, whether this game was being called tightly or not, to me, it was just super obvious that the offensive line was not comfortable. So I want to mention why I think coming into next game, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in the Wisconsin preview that's going to come out on Wednesday, but I think that next game, a lot of these things will be fixed, and for namely 2 reasons. One, the reason why the reason why Tyler Booker moved over to left tackle was that Elijah Pritchett was dinged up a little bit in the last game, and DeBoer's official statement on it after the game was, last game he got a minor ding. He didn't practice much earlier in the week. He was ready to go, but we were trying to go on as long as possible to keep him 100% healthy, right? So what ended up happening at the end of the game, when Alabama scored on 3 straight possessions, they actually pulled Formby with the 4 holding calls and put in Elijah Pritchett, and it completely changed that right side of the offensive line. And Alabama was able to run behind that right side and be successful running the ball. Typically, they run behind Tyler Booker, but since Booker was at the tackle position, once they went over to that right side and you didn't have Formby holding every time that you ran to that side, you were able to actually be successful running behind the right side of the offensive line. They break off 2 large runs that were explosive plays to get touchdowns, as well as the pass play to Ryan Williams that we'll talk about here in a minute. So that was the big thing, obviously, that changed the offensive line at the end of the game. It was about 7 minutes to go when they made that change, and then Alabama, like I said, scored on 3 straight possessions. Both runs were to that right side of the offensive line on Pritchett's side, and it really just felt like that was the game-shifting thing, right? I would be shocked if Formby starts against Wisconsin. In my opinion, the offensive line against Wisconsin, based on what we've heard, Caden Proctor will be back, so you're going to have Proctor at left tackle, Booker at guard, and then your center and right guard are going to stay how they've always been with Jaden Roberts and Parker Brailsford. And then you're going to have Elijah Pritchett playing right tackle, and you're going to be completely good, right? The offensive line is going to be back to the starters that you probably practice with a lot of the fall camp and the guys that are normally there. And that having the guys that are regular playing with each other is going to be a huge impact to the offensive line. Obviously, your shifts and stuff, you're not going to have to ship to overcompensate for somebody that maybe not as strong pass blocking or vice versa. I think it's just going to be a much better setup when you have your actual offensive line. So that's what I fully expect for the Wisconsin game. We'll talk about that later this week, but that's the big thing that I think is obviously going to change, and that was the biggest issue in this game that you saw fixed. The other thing that DeBoer mentioned, and this goes into exactly what I said, his quote on it was, "It's hard to call a game. It's hard to overcome second and long and third and long situations. We had to learn some lessons the hard way. There's no doubt about it," right? At the end of the day, Alabama shot themselves in the foot, as I mentioned, and those second and longs, those third and longs, those fumbles, that led to this game being much closer than what it actually was, right? The score indicated this being a very close game, and it really wasn't. Alabama's defense, and we'll talk about it here later on, was incredible. Alabama's offense was putting their defense in very bad positions, and the defense, time after time after time, was coming up huge. They were coming up absolutely massive. South Florida scores just one touchdown in this game, and, I mean, Alabama's defense looked great, even though they were being put on the field in bad positions. And like I said, Alabama did great. So I was very happy with what I saw on the defensive side of the ball. But like I said, the offensive line, when you're talking about the offense, first and foremost, that was your big problem. From the quarterback perspective, I think that Milroe, I'm going to give him a little bit of a pass this week. There were a couple of passes that he definitely overthrew, but I personally think that Milroe was really concerned that he was about to get sacked, and he was running for his life. There were quite a few moments where, he drops back, and the minute he drops back, somebody's in his lap, and so he starts running backwards, and a lot of people would be like, "Why are you running backwards?" Well, he's running backwards also to try to escape the pocket, because if he wants to have a chance to throw the ball away, you got to get out of the pocket. And it just, to me, it felt like Milroe was getting absolutely overrun, and he wasn't able to go through true progressions. In the play of the game that they ended up actually drawing up with Chris Stewart on Twitter, that they released it, where DeBoer draws it up with Chris Stewart, he actually has a pocket. He steps up in the pocket. DeBoer shows how he goes through his progressions. He ends up hitting Kobe Prentice. Kobe breaks a tackle, gets the touchdown, right? So Jalen was going through his reads when he had the time to do so, right? When Alabama actually started running the ball and getting positive possessions where it wasn't second and long and third and long into those cover zero situations, Jalen looked fine. He was not the issue in this game. The other thing, and I just want to mention the wide receivers and running backs real quick, and then we're going to shift to the defense because I really want to talk about them. Wide receivers, Ryan Williams, I mean, what can you say about the kid? He now has 6 touches, 6 catches for 3 touchdowns, over 207 yards now. He is all-world everything. He is the next great Alabama receiver. He is absolutely awesome. I mean, 17 years old, what can you say about the kid? He is really, really good. There was a play that, in my opinion, should have been pass interference on a really long pass play that he still almost came down with. But, I mean, just overall, he is a speedster. He also can run great routes. He has the ability to break tackles. He did it again here, where he gets hit on kind of a hitch and then takes it to the house on a 8-yard hitch, takes it for a 40-yard touchdown. He is really special with the ball in his hands and is an absolutely incredible pickup. The other side of the ball, we saw a few more catches out of Jeremy Bernard. We saw Caleb Odom get in a little early. So we're definitely working some other receivers in. But for me, the receiving core, I can't look too much at just because we weren't able to go through the same progressions and really get into the passing attack like I expected because of how we were shooting ourselves in the foot at the offensive line. The running backs, by and large, were very, very good. The one exception was Jam Miller did have one of the fumbles. It's going to happen, but you just don't like to see it. So that's the one thing that I would say about that side of the ball. Like I said, you don't really like to see the fumble, but Jam Miller and Justice Haynes both break off big runs for touchdowns at the end of the game. They were running hard. It did not have the same level of impact in the rushing game as it had last game. Again, I think a lot of that stems from the offensive line, but we'll see what it looks like when you have the original offensive line back in next week. So, I know I'm harping a lot on the offensive line. I personally think it was the biggest issue with our offense, and it was the reason why your running attack didn't look as good, because your running attack wasn't as good. It didn't open the downfield passing game because Jalen didn't have time to throw. I think it all stems from that line, and I think that the coaches understand that, right? So I'm curious to see what happens next game when we have a little bit more solidified offensive line with guys playing with each other in the positions that they're supposed to be. Now let's move to the defense, because I had a lot of questions about the defense, even after last game. Obviously, Alabama gets the 2 takeaways last game, and I was thinking, yeah, I mean, they looked good, but, was this the fact that we got up early? How is the defense able to really get off the field? They sustained a lot of long drives. The defense is great. I really liked what I saw out of the defensive line, out of the linebackers, out of the safeties. I think our corners are probably the weakest part of our defense, which scares me if you go up against a really elite receiving core like a Missouri with like a Luther Burden or something. That kind of scares me a little. However, I think that we have the talent, and they're just young, right? You've got Mbakwe that comes in for Xavier Brown after Xavier Brown had 2 deep shots taken against him. And, so you bring in Mbakwe for a little extra speed. We're able to shut it down. And like I said, Alabama gives up the 1 touchdown. However, on the other 3 possessions, you hold them to 3 points. Alabama did a very good job of getting off the field even when they were put in very bad positions. Like I said, Alabama fumbles a kickoff, and we'll talk about that when we go through the special teams. Alabama fumbles a kickoff and ends up having, putting the defense back on the field in a very bad position. Defense gets right off the field. Alabama at the end of the game, has the defense backed up. Defense is on the 7-yard line and holds them to 3 points. That, in my opinion, was the wrong call. A reporter asked Alex Golish about it post-game, and he was not. He said that he kicked the field goal so that if Alabama kicked it, it wouldn't be a 2-score game. It's a little confusing because Alabama hasn't kicked a field goal all season. I think I understand where he was coming from. I personally think it was kind of him giving up, because with 8 minutes to go in the game and Alabama had just scored a touchdown, South Florida wasn't really moving the ball a whole lot. If you're in the red zone that close, I think you got to go for the points. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, he gets paid to be the head coach, so that's his decision. But I personally would have scored the touchdown or gone for the touchdown. And then at a minimum, you're giving Alabama the ball at the 7-yard line. And maybe if you can overwhelm the offensive line, you could go for a safety, right? Because of the success that they had on the defensive line against our O-line, I really just think the better call would have been to go for it there. That's me personal. However, like I said, when we're talking about the defense, I really thought the defensive line looked great. The linebackers, the safeties, all very, very good. I was concerned about the running quarterback. Byron Brown did get his from a running perspective, but Alabama was able to shut him down when they made him throw the ball. Brown is a good passer. He just didn't have all of his stuff. Honestly, had he had his stuff yesterday in Bryant-Denny or Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium, it would have maybe been a different game. There were a few deep balls that he just slightly overthrew. Even when he had his man, those throws at Xavier Brown, he went at him in back-to-back plays. His man had a step on him both times, slide overthrows, and Alabama was able to walk out with a pretty convincing victory, at least on the scoreboard, right? Like I said, I do think that a better passer would have made Alabama pay. There was a wheel route that he missed, slide overthrow. Like I said, the deep balls were overthrows. It just was a bit off for what Brown is capable of. And to Alabama's credit, they were able to put some pressure on him. They were able to confuse him a little. But if he was on, I really think it could have been a different outcome for South Florida. But Alabama's defense comes up huge. I'm very happy with what I saw, and the defense is great. And then the special teams, Burnup was really, really good. He had one punt that kind of spun backwards on him, which wasn't ideal, but overall, Burnup was awesome. The only thing on the special teams that I really want to talk about is on the return side. You had an injury to Cole Adams. It was an arm injury. They're going to be looking at it to see how he is. So you may have a different punt returner here coming in. Mbakwe came in and had about a 30-yard return that was very, very good to kind of jumpstart the offense. So that was great to see. So if you do have, if Cole is out, you're probably going to see Mbakwe back returning. And then Kendrick Law did bring a kickoff out of the end zone. Looks like he's going to break it for a touchdown, or maybe, just break it for a 40-yard return. Around the 40-yard line, he gets stripped, loses the ball. Their kicker recovers it at about the 50. So there was a sloppy plays kind of all across the field. The defense is really the only group that did not have, any like super sloppy plays. I guess the only issue was Damani Jackson got called for holding twice at the corner position, but no real breaks in coverage. Defense looked solid against a pretty quick and pretty efficient offense. Alex Golish is a great offensive coordinator and head coach. So overall, you had to like what you saw. The best breakdown that I've seen on Twitter, I want to give a shout out to Blake Byler, a friend of the show, a friend of mine. But he kind of said it. My simplified 2-week assessment of Alabama football is the defense is better than expected, with the D-line, linebackers, and safeties all being nasty. Corners are a weakness, but there's talent. 100% agree with that. The O-line needs a personnel stability. Absolutely. I think everyone would agree with that. Running backs are excellent. And Ryan Williams is a revelation. Ready to see an opened up playbook for Milroe. I think that's 100% true. I think that as soon as you get the offensive line settled, I think Milroe starts getting more plays at his discretion. I think that the running backs and their ability to run the ball, run through gaps, hit the hole hard, and also pass block are going to open up the passing game. You just need that offensive line to get settled. As soon as the line gets settled, I think that it's going to be a whole different ball game, and you're going to need it because you're going into Camp Randall Stadium at 11 o'clock on Saturday. So, like I said, we'll talk about that one here coming up. But before I finish this episode, I absolutely have to talk about the day that was yesterday. So, for those of you that are unaware, yesterday they officially named the stadium, Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium. And I was outspoken against this, or about this, when it was announced that I was not sure if it was going to be enough. I was not sure if it was going to fully encompass the greatness that Saban was. I personally preferred like a Bryant Saban Stadium or something like that. And I will admit that the way that this is being handled, I may have been wrong. I think what they're pushing this to be officially named is Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium, instead of just naming the field Saban Field, right? A lot of places just name something, oh, this is named after this person, versus Alabama is going full in on this is Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Not this is Bryant-Denny Stadium and like, oh, they're playing on Saban Field. It's kind of an afterthought. This is like becoming the official name, and it was huge. I think that all the things that they've done to kind of reiterate it were absolutely incredible. Me and one of my friends were out at the ceremony at 2:30 before Walk of Champions, where Nick and Terry were talking about it, and they unveiled there's a sign out front of the stadium, and I'll post some pictures where the sign drops, and it says Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium, where it used to just say Bryant-Denny Stadium. They put up some lighted signs inside the stadium, again, that say Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium. There was an absolutely incredible tribute that happened right after the band played at halftime. They were in their formation. Then they shift into spelling out Saban Field on the field. Saban walks out to Thunderstruck alone down the tunnel, and just, it was absolutely incredible and was what he deserved, right? It was an absolute honor that he deserved to be able to walk out on the field. He spoke up a bit at halftime about how grateful he was. And then, like I said, they lit up the signs inside the stadium, and I thought that the tribute for him was absolutely world class. It was a 10 out of 10. It was what he deserved, and it was absolutely incredible, right? I think that because of how they did that and how they're going to be referring to it as Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium and not just Bryant-Denny Stadium playing on Saban Field, right? Like, not as an afterthought. I think that it is deserved, right? I still probably prefer if it was Bryant-Saban Stadium or something, but I understand why they didn't want to change it, and I think that the amount that they're going above and beyond to make sure that Saban Field is mentioned, I think that it's absolutely deserved. I think it's credit that he needs it and what he's done for the community, what he's done for the university. And I thought that it was absolutely awesome. So if you have not seen the video or weren't at the game, I'm going to link a video that Alabama football posted on Twitter in the comments. It's about 3 minutes long. You absolutely need to watch it. It kind of breaks down all day. It shows Saban's speech out front of the stadium at the ceremony at 2:30. The unveiling of the banner. It also then shows his speech that happened during game time. There's a really cool drone shot when Thunderstruck's playing and he walks out on the stadium. Just was absolutely incredible. I thought that it was really very fitting for the coach that he was and what he's meant to the stadium, to the university, to the state. And so, like I said, I really recommend you watching it if you have not already. I'm also going to post a few photos, and they'll probably be showing as I'm speaking here in the edit. Just some photos that they got that really were absolutely incredible, of him either walking out or him and his family kind of looking up at the field being named after him. And it absolutely was deserved, and I thought that was a very fitting tribute to the person and coach that Nick Saban was, and is. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. If you have, like I said, if you have not seen the basketball video that I posted on Thursday, there have been a lot of basketball news. I didn't want to cover it in this episode today, so I actually put out a separate video on YouTube on Thursday. So if you have not seen that, I will link it in the show notes. Definitely check it out. I really recommend it. I also have it shown here on the end screen. But like I said, please check it out if you haven't already. I really would recommend you watching it. But thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and we will be previewing Wisconsin on Wednesday. See you later. Peace.